Hi, welcome to Tonight Heavy. My name's Dr. Karis Rees and I got with me today Caitlin Davis. We are from Neath Batalba Education Psychology Service and we're here doing one of our Tonight Talks with parents' questions. So at the end of this podcast, I'll be able to show you the QR codes where you yourself can actually submit any questions that you have for us to be able to have a discussion about. And also there'll be links to our other Tonight Talks, which includes podcasts talking about things like emotional regulation, teenage brain, developing resilience, and a lot more. Thank you for joining us today, and please like and subscribe on all of our platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Prime.
Hi everyone, so I'm going to be reading out the questions today. So thank you to those who submitted them. It's some really interesting questions I think a lot of people can relate to, and we'll be able to give some really good kind of understanding and strategies in relation to these. So starting us off, I'm going to read the first question out. So my daughter is 8, and when she gets angry at home, she often goes straight for her older sibling and becomes aggressive, even if they haven't done anything. She's also refusing to go to school and gets very distressed in the mornings, often refusing to get dressed. Schools say they don't see any of this and describe her as well behaved, so it feels like she's masking all day and then exploding at home. We're really worried and unsure about how to help her. We also don't know why this might be happening and what we might be able to do to kind of support her.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the listener that's written in with this question. This is just to reassure you, this very common theme that we find with especially our 8-year-olds. You're describing there about her getting angry when she's at home, going for her older sibling, even if there's sort of no known trigger in a way. And as we know, the relationships between siblings can be difficult at times, which is normal. That's typical of, sadly, what we would expect. And you and I, Caitlin, are both from families with his siblings.
Yeah.
And we've got plenty of stories where we would have come to some disputes, I'm sure. But I can see that as the parent, this can be really, really worrying, and I can understand why you are feeling worried and how you want to help us. So thank you for writing in. You've mentioned there things like she's refusing to go to school, getting very distressed in the morning, and then you say about school not seeing any of this behaviour, and actually she's really well behaved in school, and that's where you're questioning whether she's masking all day. So there's a lot going on in this question, and I really am grateful that you've provided a lot of information, because the more detail you give us, the better we're able to help and try and understand specifically what's going on. The one thing I will say here that the advice and guidance that we're giving is going to be quite generalized, because there's a lot of detail, as a psychologist, that we would want in order to really understand before we can explain exactly what's going on. So I'm going to talk in broader terms here. The things that we know that she's 8, and the age of 8 is one of those key ages, isn't it, Caitlin, that we see with kids. They're really starting to find their feet. They're starting to develop what we call empathy as well, or already have, on that journey of developing empathy. So this is where we get a lot of confused and mixed emotions, because as we know with our younger children, they're quite egocentric, aren't they? Their frustration often comes from a sense of, it's all about me, I'm not getting my needs and wants met. But however, when they start to turn around 8, things start to change, and what we might be finding is that she's starting to experience the world differently. This can be very confusing, because what she might start doing, which she didn't do before, is starting to think, what have I done in this situation? Have I contributed to us? This is where we start getting that sense of identity. And that's where we start to think about their role within the family, within their friendship group, within their school environment. And as you've said already, that she's doing really well in school. So she's clearly kind of identifying herself as being, good pupil, respectful, following instructions, working hard. And you mentioned there masking. Now, masking is a term that is used to try to explain that when someone is bottling things up, and actually it's getting to the point where it's overflowing then by the time they get home. And that is something that is very common and what we tend to all often do, as in the way that we behave in certain situations and environments is very different to what we behave at home. Like I know me and you, Caitlin, I'm sure we behave very differently at home than we do in work. Thank goodness. Because as any human being develops, they develop different sense of self within different environments, with different people. And it sounds like to me that, as much as she is, managing very well as it appears in school, actually, she's finding that frustrating. She's finding that potentially exhausting in a way that by the time she comes home, she is just frustrated. She doesn't know what to do with all of that. And hence the easy target is her older brother by the sounds of things.
I wanted to just pick up on what you were saying kind of about empathy, like the age your daughter is, we start to think about them developing those social emotions. And whilst empathy is, a very helpful one, there are some emotions that start to develop. There are perhaps, I don't want to say not helpful because they're there for a reason, but can be really distressing for a little one. So kind of shame is one, and embarrassment. They're kind of one that start to develop around the same time. And again, I want to set a caveat is that, I don't know the kind of the ins and outs of what's going on for your family. But I'm wondering if your little one maybe feels a comparison to their sibling, in the sense of maybe their sibling is maybe on the outside looking like they're having an easier time of it. And I'm wondering if that shame around that frustration and that kind of, like you said, exploding at home, and the impact that's having on your kind of home and family dynamic. I wonder if your daughter's having difficulty maybe processing that, and so what she may be doing is turning that shame into anger, and it's being directed at perhaps what she feels is the opposite of her experience. If she's having a difficult time and her older siblings having I don't know what's happening with the older sibling, but maybe it looks to her like her older sibling's having an easier time of it, or, is having a better time of it. That kind of shame. And shame's a really uncomfortable feeling. We have to remember that. And sometimes what we do is, when we feel uncomfortable feeling feelings, we hide them behind other feelings. And anger is a really common one, because anger is almost easier to feel.
But also anger's always the symptom of something else.
Absolutely.
Same with anxiety, isn't it? And I think what you described there, Caitlin, beautifully is about, not only is this common that children develop empathy, then it sadly comes shame and embarrassment. That's a huge thing. But also what you noted on there is about potential sibling, not necessarily rivalry, but also there's that, and
social comparison.
Exactly. And again, if the older sibling appears to be doing better, which they would because they're older, we would expect that, wouldn't we? It's difficult for an 8-year-old to go, well, actually they're older than me, so they should be able to do better than me at A, B, and C. Or they might be struggling with something that is typically they haven't been so aware. So for example, they could both be, go to dance or whatever it could be, and actually your 8-year-old has now started to realise that they aren't as good as what they thought they were. Like we know that egocentric younger child, they often, they've got that confidence, which is wonderful and beautiful. However, when they get to this age of 8, that's when they start to do those social comparisons and sibling comparisons. And they might be really struggling with that, but not realise it. They might feel that things are unfair, and that the older sibling is having an easier time. And that just fuels that frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. And which, like I said, it could be leading to what we're seeing in terms of that lashing out. Because another thing is, an 8-year-old isn't necessarily going to have the language skills to be able to say, or even the kind of the introception to be able to reflect on that. I mean, most adults don't, but to reflect and think, oh, do you know what? Maybe I'm a little bit frustrated with my sibling because I feel like they are maybe showing me up in some way, or they're highlighting some things about myself that I'm not too happy with. Um,
And
so
that's,
actually that the behavior there, which is the lashing out and the being aggressive, is a symptom, is giving you information about those internal feelings, which we often find with behavior. Behavior really is information. If we can look behind what's behind that behavior, we can actually get a lot of understanding of what's going on for our little ones
yeah.
in those moments.
And you mentioned it, interoception, and that's the communication between the body and the mind, isn't it? Interoception involves knowing that you're starting to feel hungry. You might need a wee soon, And with a lot of our little ones, it also helps us understand. I'm getting a bit frustrated.
Yeah.
And we've learned skills that to think, oh, I'm getting a bit annoyed here. I'm going to take myself away. Whereas this little one, the 8-year-old, might not get to that point, might not be able to go, do you know what, I am thinking I'm starting to get a bit annoyed. And that's where we need to help them with a little bit of, what we call developing emotional literacy. So it's that language about your emotions, and I think the best thing we can do with that is to do that ourselves as adults.
Yeah.
To be able to say, do you know what, I'm getting a little bit annoyed. I think I need to take myself out, because getting frustrated, getting angry is normal. It's meant to happen. However, it's a way we cope with it. That's the key.
Yeah.
It's okay to go and storm upstairs and go and be on your own. That's fine, because they're coping with it instead of smashing something up or hitting someone. And that's what we need to be able to help your daughter to do, is to go, do you know what? It's okay for you to feel frustrated. Do you know it's okay that when you come home from school, you're so annoyed, you're so tired, you don't want to have conversations about school, you don't want to talk to your sibling because you've been dealing with all your friends all day. I've got a social battery, Caitlin, and sometimes mine runs out, and that's important to reflect on, that we can't be perfect all the time. And it sounds like to me she's doing such an incredible job in school, being the star pupil, that actually by the time she gets home, she's tired from it, and that's normal, that you would expect that. And I think it's about helping her to understand that actually school, as much as it's wonderful that she's doing so well, actually, is she putting too much pressure on herself? Is that pressure too much for her to carry? And actually, she's doing a great job, and I wonder whether or not she knows that. It's about praising her and saying that the effort you're putting in is incredible, and actually you need to be proud of yourself for what you're doing, but also mindful that you shouldn't push yourself too far,
Yeah, for me, I think there's like linking it back to what I said about behavior being information. We've got this kind of presentation related to school. So, the little one's very distressed in the morning, she's refusing to get dressed, she's refusing to go to school. So that's telling us something about school, isn't it? So for me, it'd be around, actually, what is it specifically around school that's maybe, causing that, like linked to what Cara was saying, is causing that frustration or exhaustion? Are there certain things that she's finding difficult? Are there things she's putting too much pressure on? Is there certain parts of the day that are overwhelming her? It's about understanding at that deeper level of what's going on. Could be a friendship group, could be transition. Maybe she's had a new teacher this year and she misses her old teacher. There could be a number of things. And knowledge is power. And once we understand what that information is telling us, that's a really good kind of link in then to looking at actually what do we need to do to support that what is happening. Which brings me on to kind of a next point is actually, I know we've discussed what could be going on here, and and that this is, I know it doesn't feel like in the moment, but you're not alone in this experience. What kind of strategies would we be thinking for this family around supporting this little one, Car?
I think talking about emotions is key here, because ultimately we've got a child who is getting to the point of huge frustration where she's then taking it out on their sibling. And I think what we need to do in order to prevent those explosions is to start that communication, developing the vocabulary, the words we're using, developing that interoception, that communication between the mind and the body. Talking about yourself, saying, I got really annoyed today at work because, the photocopier wasn't working and my hands went really tight, my face went red, and I wanted to kick the photocopier, but I didn't. I took a breath and I went for a walk around the office and then came back. And it's about talking about yourself in those shoes, because for me, what I'm hearing is that there's potentially this child is a bit of a putting a lot of pressure on herself to be perfect within school. What we want her to know is that actually it's okay to feel angry. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or you can't do something. It's about, understanding that everyone feels this and that she's not alone with it. Especially when you talked about that shame and that guilt. Those emotions are so horrendous for a child to feel. Sadly, they are there to help us in some way, but when they're feeling them, consistently and over time, it's really horrible, and we want to prevent that. So helping her to feel like she isn't alone is really important. Helping her to feel that actually what she's feeling is normal, but how she copes with it is what we need to help her change. So it's about saying, do you know what? Coming in from school, I can see that you might need some time alone. I can see that you might need to go and just chill out for a bit. I'll give you some food. Go and chill out. Go and relax. Maybe go for a walk together or something with no questioning, because as we know, the minute you ask a child, what have you done in school today? They say nothing. It's because they can't access that part of the brain where they can just tell you everything. We often hear parents say, gosh, when I go to put them to bed, that's when everything comes out, because that's when they're relaxed. That's when they come, and that's when they're able to process the day, because they've had that gap from school to home. And that's maybe something you want to put in place, is that time in, so that you can have those conversations when she's more relaxed and usually before bed, because it'll help her as well prepare for the next day. Because you're saying you're struggling to get her to get changed, it might be because she's got a little worry on her mind, which is a big worry for her. And actually, it could be really helpful having that time in to say, let's talk about today in school. What went well?
Yeah.
What went well in school today? And she might be able to say, I finished my maths work before everyone else. That's wonderful. I bet you felt proud of yourself then. What things are you looking forward to tomorrow? And it's about being in that positive mindset, isn't it? It's about thinking about, okay, what things am I looking forward to help her then drift off to sleep successfully as well, because sleep is so important. I know you've not mentioned anything here about sleep, but that's not something that is really important for us to have. And her being able to have that time in with you to be able to process the day and put it to one side, and look forward to the following day, because when she wakes the following day, this is where I'd be giving her options, waking her with enough time, opening the curtains. I know it's still very dark, sadly, but if you can get daylight coming in, that helps rise our children and wake them up, rather than the shouting. And sometimes it's like panic stations, isn't it, in the mornings? But it'd be about giving her choices as well. Would you like to get changed into your school uniform first, or would you like to have breakfast first? You choose. Ultimately, that helps give her autonomy. That helps relax that nervous system, because as we know, when we wake up, the cortisol, natural hormone to help wake us, but we know that cortisol is also linked to those feelings of anxiety as well. So when she wakes, that's in the morning, is that highest form of level of cortisol. And what we need to do is use that in a productive way, because it's about giving her then control over her options within reason. So it's either this or this, you choose. That will help her in the mornings. So the key from this is what I would say is developing that emotional literacy and those interoception skills. So the literacy would be the vocabulary around emotions, you role modeling, you going through situations where you felt your body's change, yeah, because that's developing that interoception. So I started to get hot and flustered, my hands started to get tight, whatever it may be. Then you want to talk about the day of the school, because again, like you said, Caitlin, there could be something going on in school, and actually that time before bed is a chance for her to kind of process that. And then it's about giving choices in the morning, so she feels more in control and she feels like she's not being pressured into anything, because ultimately it is tough, isn't it, for our 8-year-olds. And I'm hoping then that we'll be able to give her that space to be able to come home from school, relax and calm without any interference from anyone, without any questioning, so that she can relax a bit. Because it sounds like to me, that you use the word masking, it sounds like she's holding it all together so well during the day, and it's when she comes home in a safe place that it's overspilling.
Yeah.
I hope that's been helpful.
No, absolutely. I was just going to say, I love that idea of that kind of time in, that tuning in, kind of looking at that space. Another thing I was just kind of thinking is, very much related to what Carl was saying about having that space to kind of, to almost kind of regulate after school, is maybe thinking about like a coping toolkit. So looking at putting things together that really help her emotional regulation. It is going to be trial and error. But I'm thinking, if there's that physicality in terms of like, when she's hitting the older sibling, it may be kind of having some time on a punch bag or something like that. If she likes certain music, it might be having some time to listen like that. If you pop kind of emotion regulation coping toolkits into Google, I'm sure there'll be lots of helpful strategies and suggestions.
We also have a Tom I Talks on
Absolutely.
with our occupational therapist, James Marshman, who talks about sensory toolkits, and that could be really helpful in this case. So please listen back to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So that might just be something to have a little think about. Like I said, it's going to be trial and error, because we don't, magically know. And it's probably going to change as she gets older, and then she kind of develops in her kind of emotional regulation, her emotional literacy. But yeah, just something to have a little think about. But yeah, that was really helpful, Kath. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Caitlin. Who have we got next?
So we're just going to move on to our second question. So thank you again to the person who sent that in. So, my 14-year-old just hasn't been themselves for a while now. They've been really down and on edge, and they've started pulling away from their friends. They used to be so outgoing, but now they just want to stay in their room or be on their own. What really upsets me is that they won't talk to anyone at school or let any adults help. A while back, something untrue was posted about them on social media, and the teacher they trusted believed it without even speaking to them first. Even though it's now been proven not to be true, they still can't bring themselves to trust teachers and people again. I can see they're finding things really tough, but I feel totally stuck. When they close themselves off like this, I don't know what to do or how to reach them. I just want them to feel okay again and be able to get the help they need. I just don't know how to get them there.
Oh gosh,
it's a really tricky one, this is.
And so sad as well, isn't it? Because when you thank you to the parent writing this in, because when you started the reading it, Caitlin, I was like, oh, okay. And then it was that social media post that was untrue. And my gosh, your child, I'm assuming a boy, is 14, and to have something posted online about you that's untrue, it's so damaging. Don't get me started on the damaging effects of social media. It's incredible, and as we know, once it's out there, isn't it? And often peers, they're at that age where they do believe everything that's on social media. You see these teenagers, or even younger children, but some of our teenagers will believe what they're seeing on TikTok or Snapchat, and it's like things like AI coming into the forefront now. It's really worrying, isn't it? But I can understand why your teenager, that he feels completely, trust is broken. At this age, oh my gosh, it's is such an important age for social relationships. And this is where, peer relationships, friendships and, those relationships are so important. They're more important to them than their family relationships, and that's normal. That's what helps them to go through that phase of leaving, flying the nest and finding another family. And that's a normal part of life, sadly. But, what we've found here is that at a key age in his life, something's not only been posted online about him, which was embarrassing, which is likely shameful, which we talked about just now in this other question, how damaging that can be, those big feelings, but also the fact that it wasn't true, and then the fact that people didn't believe him. Now that is huge. All of those factors are so detrimental to his sense of safety
and his worldview as well. If you think you spend, I think from our childhood, we always have this idea around, life is good and good things happen to good people. And there's, we think about like the Disney movies and as long as you stay true to yourself and, good will prevail and all those kinds of messages. So ultimately, his worldview has been disrupted in the sense of suddenly it's become very real to him that bad things can happen to him regardless of who he is as a person or regardless of what's going on in life. And like you said, that's going to really disrupt that sense of safety. It's going to make him feel very much a threat, the sense of kind of, that something could go wrong for him at any moment. And actually, to him, in his perception, when he needed his kind of safety, when he needed adults and the people around who were meant to protect him in terms of like the teachers the most, they weren't, for whatever reason, in his mind, in his perception, they weren't there for him in that moment. And so that kind of undermines trust in adults outside of the family as well, because his brain might have made the association that actually when I need adults who are not related to me, when I need them to be on my side and to give me that sense of safety, they are not coming through that. And again, I just want to put a caveat there, as we don't know about the school situation. So this is very much, I'm talking about his perception, his kind of his view of the situation. No kind of, not making it, passing any comment or judgment on the professionals in this case.
No, because ultimately what is really difficult for someone in this situation, so your son in this situation, to understand is that schools do have to, like any professionals, have to follow a process. So something, and we don't know what it was, but something untrue was posted online, and ultimately an investigation had to take place into whatever those claims were in order to ensure everyone was okay, and I'm glad that that investigation clearly has been done, because like you said in your question, is that it's been proven to be untrue. Unfortunately, that has caused more damage for your son, that he feels that people don't trust him. And I think it would be helpful for your son to be able to understand that there are processes that need to be followed, as with anyone, and to help him not to feel that it was personal, because schools have a duty of care, and again, it's really important that they do follow that, and it sounds like to me that has been followed. However, I completely understand his perspective on things. He's been wrongly accused, clearly something shameful, because the way he's withdrawn from everyone, and that embarrassment, but also that mistrust now. And it sounds like to me that he's also withdrawn not only from school teachers and his significant trusted adults in school, but also his peers. And that to me is really sad, that he must feel very alone, because he doesn't have those peer relationships, and neither does he have the trust in adults who are there, to support him. And I think there's obviously a lot that needs to be done here to support him, because that is a very difficult thing to go through, on social media, and we need to protect him, but also to help him to feel that he has been listened to, and that he can trust people. And I think one of the key things here would be supporting him to understand the process. But ultimately, the most important thing would be that restorative work with school. And what I would be recommending, our schools in Youth Talbot are wonderful, and they've got excellent pastoral leads. If you as the parent could contact school and share this, and obviously they should be aware of your son and this, what has gone on, but to help him to feel supported by school. And it would be about school going through that restorative process with him to help him to feel safe again. Because ultimately he feels unsafe, he feels like he can't trust the world. And also, like you said, Caitlin, his view of himself.
Yeah,
Absolutely. He's
absolutely.
questioning that now as well, which is really sad.
I think for me, I think what I've been thinking is the brain makes associations. It's how we learn, it's what keeps us safe in life. And unfortunately, your son, because of his perception and the situation, has made an association. And what happens now is we need to unlearn that association and relearn a more adaptive, more positive association. Because I think something that you alluded to in the question was that perhaps that you're seeking additional support because your son isn't feeling himself around being on edge and feeling quite low, and that your son isn't necessarily engaging with this additional support, because of his difficulty with trusting external adults. So I think this is something that may take a little bit of time, and it's okay to recognize that, in that when, like with any situation where trust has been depleted, there is going to be that process of building that trust. And one thing I would like to note, that again, I'm not sure, but if you are bringing any professionals to become involved to support, they're going to have to earn his trust.
Yes.
They're going to have to do relationship building. They're going to have to show him that they hear him and they're responding to him, and that that they are there for him in that situation. So it's a difficult process, but it is something that, that relationship building is going to be so imperative to any situation that your son is in, because of his difficulty trusting and taking that time to establish that rapport and that connection.
And I think again, what's key here is validating his emotions.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because as much as we may say, oh, but it's done now and you've been proven innocent, the damage is still being done. He's still, feeling that experience. And again, that's what we need to help him, is go, do you know, I get why you feel like you can't trust anyone, because the people that you needed by your side weren't, you felt weren't there, and I think that's, what you said, Caitlin, is about anyone who engages with him needs to be consistent, needs to constantly be there, even if he's, pushing them away in some respects. It's about saying, but okay, I'm always going to be here to listen, And there are key adults in school, like heads of year, pastoral leads. We've got ELSAs within our schools who are really good, and it's about finding someone that can support him. What I'd also want to explore as well is that withdrawal from his peers. And I think that is really important that we unpick that as well, because it sounds like to me he feels let down by his peer group as well, or he may just feel so ashamed. Even if his peer group were on his side, which is, he must feel so ashamed that he doesn't want to see people, and that to me is so sad, isn't it? And whether or not you can support him to, re-engage with maybe one, because going out with a big group of lads might be too much for him, but actually just catching up with one of his mates, giving them some money to go to McDonald's or whatever, or go out on their bikes together, whatever it is that can just help to start rebuild those relationships, because ultimately that's going to be his key network of support, and again, he needs to be able, because he'll be able to relate far better with them than an adult in school, because that's, that's the nature of teenagers and adolescents, is to come together as a unit. And we need to reinstate that for him and help him to get back to that point where he feels he's got that network of support.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be about kind of widening that network of support as well, in the sense of perhaps kind of, opportunities for him to kind of form positive relationships outside of that context. Obviously we want to be mindful, we don't want to push him too far.
No.
But, I'm thinking about maybe if there was opportunities for him to kind of create new social connections, that might give him a little bit of confidence to revisit those old connections as well. If there was a sport he was interested in. I'm just thinking around it. I'm very conscious that when somebody becomes quite socially isolated, that can have an impact on their general engagement. So maybe around, like I said, a sport or a certain interest or a hobby, and just allowing him to maybe briefly step away from that context to experience successful, positive relationships again, which then may, give an opportunity to have those discussions around revisiting those former connections.
Because it could even just be you going out with his cousins, and him connecting with his cousins. Part of the family, but at least then he's getting out and about with other, if you're lucky enough to have cousins the same age as him, or maybe your best friend's kids, might be similar
Building all that confidence, isn't it?
To be out and about, but you're there with him, so it's like kind of scaffolded by yourself.
Absolutely.
I hope that's been helpful. Thank you so much for writing in, and please do get back in touch if you do have an update for us. We'd love to hear that. Also, if you find that you wanted to give us more information so that we could give sort of more specific advice, please do that as well. But thank you to the two parents that have written in today. It's been certainly excellent discussion. My gosh, I will admit that there's probably lots, Caitlin, that we have forgotten to say.
Yes.
Because, with a short space of time, please make sure that you contact, have a look at our other Tonai talks as well, because there'll be we go into far more depth about certain strategies in those, and have a look. But also feel free to write in, and again, as parents of Neitha Talbot, you can always request a parent drop-in to meet with me to discuss your child as well. So there's always other avenues open to you if you are concerned about your child. On the screen there, we've got the QR codes, so you can scan that, so you can access our other podcasts that we've done, our Tonai Talks, but also there's another QR code there if you want to ask us a question. So please do write in. We love hearing from you, and we want to be able to reach as many parents as possible, because for those of you writing in and asking us a question, I'm sure there's plenty of parents out there that are in the same situation and that would benefit from it as well. So please don't ever think a question is too silly to ask.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr pawb.